On tonight, I want to share a story with you that you may or may not have heard. The probability is that you have not heard it because it's one of those stories that shows a positive outcome for a person that did not have the most idealistic upbringing. It seems as if when there is something negative to report, another way to further shame or guilt individuals, those stories are highlighted and are constantly mentioned, whether it's on the radio, on the news, or even in popular conversation. Rarely do we hear motivating, exciting, encouraging, and uplifting stories. And so I'd like to share one with you on tonight. There's a person that you may want to take note of. His name is Bun Bidaway. He's not a person tucked away in history, though we have an opportunity to study historical figures from time to time. Bun is a contemporary individual who has an interesting life story. At this time, he is a millionaire, a business person. His business portfolio includes real estate. In fact, he began his businesses by flipping houses. He has an exotic car rental business. He owns a ladies' clothing brand. He has a studio. He has an event and entertainment business and is now getting into the tech industry. What a great portfolio, and what a great ode to a person who has done something with his life. Though he is successful in business, though he has achieved financial and career success, there is something about Bun that is noteworthy. At age 16, he was put in a juvenile detention center for firearm possession. Born in Wilmington, Delaware, this was very common. It is said by the FBI that boys 12 to 17 in the Wilmington, Delaware area are more likely to get shot and experience a life of crime and violence than they are to find success. Wilmington is called Murder Town, and it is considered one of the most violent small cities in America. So it's no surprise that Bun Bidaway was in a juvenile detention center at age 16 for firearm possession. What is interesting about him is that that was not his last time being incarcerated. He had been arrested some 7 times. One of the things that happened to him during his last incarceration is that he made the determination that it's never too late to make a turnaround. One of the motivating factors for him in turning around his life is that he looked at his environment, he looked at the systemic factors in that environment, he looked at the inequities in the judicial and penal system, and then he looked at his family. Even his own father was in prison doing a 6 to 10 year prison stint. And he recognized that in his family, all of the male members, including his father, of course, and his uncles, cousins, the male figures in his family, were either in prison or dead. And so Bun determined that someone had to save his family and that he needed to turn his life around. And so, after having been in juvenile detention at an early age, and after 7 arrests and stints in prison, time on probation, he determined to do something different with himself. And so he became a successful business person. Now, I give you his name, Bun Bidaway, because again, the stories that I share, I'm always glad for those who research, who like to do further study and further investigation. But this is not a name that you're going to hear on the news. This is not a statistic that you're going to hear about. This is not a person or a circumstance that is flashed before our eyes. Yet it is one of those stories we need to hear, and it is one of those stories that we need to hear more of. So often in the lives of individuals, we find that all of us have things in our past. If you don't have anything in your past that you have found yourself feeling bad about, it means you have no past. And obviously, everyone has a past. I find that individuals we talk to experience shame, they experience the stigma of their past, and they experience a life full of sorrow. It is amazing that God forgives us of our sins. It is even more amazing that we sometimes don't do the very same thing we want God to do, and that is we may not forgive ourselves. Within the houses of our churches are members who have had problems with alcoholism, drug addiction, incarceration. People's marriages have failed, their businesses have failed. They may have had gambling addictions. They may have had any types of sin in their lives: adultery, fornication, being a busybody, you name it. Any of us can look at ourselves and see a sin past. We find ourselves like this woman in John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. The Bible talks about the woman taken in adultery, that she was caught in the very act. It's almost as if someone was hiding behind the Motel 6, waiting for her to creep in with her latest person, looking through the windows. What is it about people that makes them so in tune to what you are doing wrong or where you fall short? Could it be that those individuals are just trying to put the spotlight on you so as to not have to address the problems or sins in their own lives? When we look at this particular woman, and we don't know her name, and we need not know her name, we need to put ourselves in her position and recognize that we have been guilty of sin, but we have also been forgiven by way of our relationship with Jesus the Christ. But there's an interesting thing that Jesus says to her. He says, "I don't condemn you, go and sin no more." For many people, the problem in our lives is not getting forgiveness for sins, but it's being obedient to that very statement that Jesus says, "Go and sin no more." Sometimes we find that we have a propensity to sin because, like Bun, by the way, we may come from environments where sin is prevalent. We might find ourselves dealing with social connections and family members and interactions from others where sin may be so common that we're easily influenced and negatively impacted by what others do. But in order for us to grow past our past, we must do some things that we see consistent in Bun Bidaway's life, and some things that will certainly help us to deal with the shame, the stigma, and the sorrow of sin. Number one, each of us must take ownership of our past. Too often we like to ignore what we have done, but we need to own it. We need to stop blaming others, stop giving others credit for choices that we've made. Even if we are followers and we followed someone's negative example or followed someone who led us to do wrong, we still must own the fact that that is a choice that we made. Sinning no more requires us to take ownership of our present and our future, but it is hard to take ownership of now and going forward when you do not own yesterday. Number two, we have to be careful not to listen to negative voices. When you have a sin past, as we all do, there are always people around you who love to tell you what you used to do and what you used to be. Every now and then, as a minister, I come across individuals who are family members or friends of members who come to visit the church, and they like to jokingly say that they know something about one of our members and they can tell you the dirt on them. I love to turn that around by saying whatever negative things you know about them just speaks to the power of the grace of God in their lives. Also, we have to be careful that we not only ignore negative voices, but each of us must learn to believe in ourselves. It is hard to get others to believe in you when you do not believe in you. When you recognize your imperfections as a person, don't drop your head and continue to walk in the shame and allow others to stigmatize you so that you continue to feel sorrow. Lift your head high, not arrogantly or cocky, but lift your head high knowing that you have been forgiven by God. And if God has forgiven you, no one else has the right to hold your past against you. Last, don't buy into the stereotypes and the statistics from others. So often we do what we do, believe what we believe, and act in the ways that we see ourselves acting because we accept that this is how we're supposed to act. We accept that statistics say this about us. When you come from a negative environment, for example, it is easy to say, well, everybody else is going to prison, or everybody else are doing drugs, or everybody else is involved in stealing, or whatever those things might be. You have to determine that you will not accept those stereotypes and believe those statistics, but that you will defy them because you're not buying into them. Some would say, preacher, this seems rather idealistic. If you only knew the past that I have, or the background that I've come from, or the family that I was born into, how could you expect me to do the very things that you are mentioning? How can I obey the words to go and sin no more? Well, remember that when Jesus gives us a command, he gives us that which is possible and not that which is impossible. He would have never said to the woman in John 8, go sin no more, if he knew it was impossible. And a practical, real world example for us, not that John 8 is not a real world example, but a contemporary real world example is Bun Bidaway, who went from juvenile detention at 16 and years of incarceration as an adult to being a successful black man earning seven-figure earnings and a successful business portfolio, all because he made up his mind that it's never too late to make a turnaround. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister with Words from the Master.